I'm excited to have Mike here with me today with the DH, the Dyslexic Hustle. Mike is an incredible guy. You work with men here locally. In the past, you've worked a lot with like athletes and movie stars. And it's really cool. Just I've been watching you from a distance for a while, and we have a mutual friend, Matthew, and so I've heard a lot about you through him. And then I got to know you, worked out a little bit together. I've been to one of your classes you did at one of the local gyms, and just watching the stuff that you were trying to teach us, about handstands. And one of the things that I liked about the class as well is you also went into like meditation and journaling and writing. And it was just really cool to see someone who's just strong and can do just crazy manly things, in a gym, and then also just kind of back down and be quiet and write and do those things. So a couple of the just cliff notes, and you should definitely go check it out. You hold 2 world records, and then you're getting ready to attempt a 3rd one. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And we'll talk about those in detail here in a minute. And then you also have paddleboarded from Florida to the Bahamas.
Bahamas to Florida.
Okay, all right, yeah. And so how many miles was that?
That was 82 miles.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So I want to hear some about that as well. You also have done some ultra marathons, 50, 100-mile races.
Yeah, I think it's like over 15 I counted. But
wow. Okay.
Some of them are a little less than that, but yeah, a couple 100-milers and a bunch of 50s.
More than me, because I've done 0. And so you've also worked with NFL athletes. You worked at the NFL Combine, is that right?
Yeah, so I've trained athletes for the NFL Combine.
Okay, all right, yeah. And so saying all that to say, you've done a lot. You've put your body to the limit. You've helped other people kind of put their bodies to the limit. And it sounds like you're also working with people to help put their minds to the limit and help them overcome difficulties and challenges. And so here we talk a lot about business and dyslexia, and kind of how those two come together and some of the challenges that just come up. We were talking about that before we started, just like being nervous about, dyslexia and where are my notes and all that kind of stuff, and trying to normalize it a little bit of like, hey, regardless of what you see on Instagram with the flashy cars and the watches and all that stuff, that's all cool if you want to have a cool car, but also just like, let's talk about behind the scenes stuff and like what it takes to be able to lift 400 pounds over your head and, some of the failures that happen along the way. So tell me a little bit about the world records that you have, and then the one that you're going to be attempting.
Yeah, so I do like to do a lot of object weightlifting.
Okay.
I have a really varied athletic background, and one thing that I'm really good at is keeping my arms straight over my head. So something that a lot of people might struggle with if they don't do a lot of overhead movements, it happens to be something I'm good at. And so Turkish get up is a movement where you lay on your back and you lift the weight up, and then you have to stand up with it overhead and then lay back down. So 3 years ago now, I had the record for most weight done it by that movement in an hour.
Wow.
So basically pick a weight, pick a rep scheme of how, like a cadence of how much you're going to do it, and then they add up the total weight, and that's your score. And so that record had been broken, but the one I'm going for next is the max weight Turkish get up, which is more in my ballpark. Okay. So like when you think of athleticism, there's lots of things to think about, but one is your aerobic system and your anaerobic system. And aerobic would be like your cardio conditioning, and your anaerobic would be like max weight, like a sprint kind of movement.
Okay.
And so most people will kind of lean somewhere on a spectrum of where they prefer to be. I definitely prefer to be anaerobic, so the like shorter, faster movements.
Okay.
But so the 1 rep lift for me probably takes like 40 seconds, hopefully, which is a lot of time in when you're holding like a certain amount of weight overhead.
Yeah.
So
how much weight are you going for?
So the record now is 200 pounds.
Okay.
And the most I've done in training is 241 pounds.
Yeah. And So go ahead and tell everyone your Instagram, because you should definitely check out his Instagram because the craziest things. What is your Instagram?
It's my name. It's Mike.Aidala.
Okay. You should definitely check that out. And we'll put a link to that so people can see it. But it's pretty impressive to watch. So our good friend, Matthew, is my personal trainer. We work out in his garage. We're supposed to do it 3 days a week if everyone shows up. But this past, I guess it was just 2 days ago, we did Turkish get-ups.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was telling him, I think he had me do it because he knew we were talking.
Oh, okay.
So but we did it, and we were just doing it with like really lightweight. Because it's a weird movement. And if you haven't go out and just see the movement, at first it's like, oh, you're just kind of doing this thing. But when you break it down, it can be a little awkward at times.
It's super awkward and really challenging. I mean, there's like 7 movements to get up, and then you reverse them all to come back down.
Yeah.
And so it can be really technical because you're holding a weight, and if that weight falls, you're in a precarious position. You don't want the weight to fall on you. So it requires a lot of strength, mobility, but really focus. Because you have to be watching that kettlebell the whole time and keeping it right in line. If it moves, it can fall, and gotta get out of the way.
Yeah, that's what I was finding just doing it. It was just connecting all the movements together.
Yeah.
Like I said, focus. Honestly, once I just focused, and Matthew kept telling me, he's like, just look over your head, focus on the weight. And I ended up doing 70 pounds with a kettlebell.
Nice. That's really good for the first time.
We had messed around a little bit with it last summer, but not consistently.
Yeah, that's very strong. Most men, when they start off with it, 35 pounds is a good goal.
Really?
And then 53 is a good goal to work towards.
Okay.
But 70 is that's great. Yeah.
Hey, I feel good now.
Yeah, that's really good. With a kettlebell too, it's challenging because it's right on your arm, and you got to keep that right position with the wrist. And if you go too far, that's a lot of weight in the wrist.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. So the next challenge that you're going for is lift anything, right?
So it's just max weight Turkish get up. The rules, when you go for a Guinness record, you have to apply, or you have to apply to break a new record. And it's hard to do that because I don't know, if they wanted to have most words said in a podcast, you can get a record doing that, but someone's already set the record for most weight, and the rules are you just have to lift something that's commercially available. Okay. So it could be a kettlebell, it could be a barbell. I'm going to do a barbell because kettlebells aren't big enough with the weight that I'm going to do.
Yeah. Because you're doing 350.
Well, not 300. 250 would be amazing.
250.
Yeah, that would be really good. But the record's 200, so I want to beat that. But I want to do something that I'm personally really proud of. Yep. Which would be more than 240 pounds.
Okay.
If I get above 250, I'd be over the moon.
Okay.
If I have a terrible day, it would be 230, which is very heavy. I mean, there's not.
Well, take us behind the scenes a little bit. So obviously, if you're just working out, if you have a bad day, you come back the next day. But if you're doing a world record and you got people there to qualify it, is it kind of you get a one shot to hit it, and then if you don't do it that day, you have to go through a process again?
Yeah, so you pick the day, and then there's no limit on how many attempts you can do, but it's so taxing on your nervous system that I'm actually working through that right now. So I'm doing it in 3 weeks, and so I'm thinking I'm going to give myself 3 fails. So if I don't accomplish it after 3 times, then I'll stop, and whatever I got before that, that's what will be my lift.
Will you work up to it? Will you?
Yeah. So I'll work up to it, and I'm hosting. It's going to be an event at a gym in Denver, my buddy's gym. So I'm raising a lot of money for veteran mental health and suicide prevention through this company, Mission 22. Okay. Who I worked with before, but 22 is the number of veterans that every year. Really? Or not every year, every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And so they have a lot of cool holistic support that they do for veterans and their families and their community. Yeah. And so people can come and watch. I think Matthew will come. You're more than welcome to come.
Yeah, I definitely will. Yeah.
It's so I don't want people watching me just fail this thing. But I also, it's one lift. So I'll warm up, and then I'll go for a couple different lifts, and then we'll kind of see
how you're feeling.
See how it flows,
Yeah.
and make an event out of it, bring some food, have some good times.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, you brought up the veterans and awareness, and I was going to save that and talk about it a little bit later, but I think it's a good segue. One of the things that we want to talk about are just like issues that people are having. With dyslexia, there's a lot of you can feel a lot. So let's back up. One of the reasons I wanted to start this channel and talk about dyslexia is it's hereditary. And so when I was, my son was born when I was 19, 20. And so very young. And it was before there was a lot of technology. And we've talked a lot about this on our different videos, like different tools and different things. But one of the things, I was very self-conscious and I was very insecure because I don't read well. And so like if you were to put a book in front of me and say, hey, read this, like I would get really nervous because like my daughter, I probably read on like a second grade level. And so along with that comes a lot of anxiety, fear, you could even say depression at times. I'm not prone to depression. So that's not something I've ever like really struggled with. I've had other family members that have. And so talking about doing hard things, and then also about awareness. My brother took his own life 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago this summer. And he had some different challenges, but dealt with addiction. And you could talk a lot about like why he struggled with addiction and all that. We won't get into all that. But when you're bringing awareness to something like, and obviously veterans is a huge thing. They deal with a lot of trauma and all types of different stuff. Your grandfather was a serviceman, is that right? Yeah. And so when you're talking to men who are struggling, maybe it's not like to the point of like things like that. Maybe they're just like mentally trying to overcome difficult things. Like, and I should back up because one of the things that you offer is you do coaching and you do training, physical coaching, and then you also offer it's called the offense, and it's actually mindset, and it's helping people get in the right frame of mind. And so when you're talking to individuals about helping them overcome difficult things and maybe self-harm and things like that, talk to me a little bit about like what your process is. What kind of questions are you asking, and what are you looking for? What are you trying to pull out of them so that you can help them, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I'm a coach and not a therapist. And so if people are coming to me with things like self-harm, I'll have some different therapists I'll work with.
Okay.
My coaching is really for someone who feels like they're at like 60 to 80% of their perceived potential. And so with that, I mean, on the lower end, 60% could be, they could struggle with some anxiety or depression, but they want to move towards that 100%. Gotcha. And so the first step for anyone that wants to do that is to develop a growth mindset, which there's Carol Dweck wrote this book, Mindset, and there's fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. And fixed is like, I am the way I am, I have dyslexia, I'm never going to be able to be successful, this is just the way I was born, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
Growth mindset would be, I have dyslexia, there's tools I can work on, I can work with the challenges I have and overcome and be successful in life. And so a lot of people, I think all people, have stories that we tell ourselves based on the circumstances that we've had in our lives, and how you view and frame those stories through your mindset can elicit success in whatever area you're trying to achieve. So if someone comes to me and they have a fixed mindset of like, this is just the way it is and I can't change it, then I will help them try to maneuver that from the fixed to the growth. And one way we'll do that is through a mindset journal. So just being aware of your thoughts. This is where in my space there's a lot of like doing the work and what is the work. And so I like to like give applicable things. Like one of my taglines for my company is a life of action. And so I don't want to just like mentally masturbate on all these things. Like I want to do stuff. And so the mindset journal would be every time you have that fixed inner dialogue, manually writing it down on a piece of paper and then changing it to a growth mindset. And over time, you start to catch when that fixed mindset comes into play, and you change it to something growth oriented.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you just start to think like, oh, I can do these things. Like,
Yeah.
I actually heard, I just made an Instagram post about this the other day or today. The question mark versus the period. Yeah, and it basically the question mark is asking like a question of what are you capable of versus the period puts an end to it. Like, I'm not going to be successful versus I'm not going to be successful. Why am I not going to be successful? What are the skills that I can work on in order to accomplish the things I want? And it elicits a more curious mindset, which is important when you're trying to grow, because any type of growth is going to have those peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a valley, recognizing that it's a valley and you will come up out of it, and there's different tools and ways in order to do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. Going back to, just because I want to just kind of put a bow on the bringing awareness, because that's part of what you're doing with the world record stuff. What do you hope to, when you promote prevention, but for veterans and stuff, what organizations, what's the name of that organization, and what's the first step, to helping bring more awareness and helping people with that, would you say?
So the organization's called Mission 22.
Okay.
And they support veterans and their families and their community after they're serving in a holistic approach. So they'll do different mindfulness exercises with them, help get them outside, get them in community, being able to connect with themselves and with other people.
Yeah.
And like all services, they need funding, they need support in order to reach more people. And so I wanted to use my physical strength to highlight the mental and emotional strength that they're doing for veterans that keep us safe and being able to live in the country that we live in.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so,
yeah, I think the community aspect of that, just walking through, someone who committed, my brother, and then also walking with my mom through all that community, I think was the biggest thing. And so I love that. And so we'll make sure we put a link to that to bring awareness that anytime there's someone doing things, obviously that's close to my heart and my family. And so, that's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, my grandfather too, he died when I was younger. And so I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And that created a lot of ripples in my family that I wasn't aware of. And because I was really young, but my mom was 30 at the time, and so she definitely had her feelings with that and different things. And I was 5, so she was taking care of me, and then that affected our relationship and the way that I was raised and the way I see just different things. And so there's a lot that I believe is allowed to be talked about and needs to be talked about in order for things to heal. And that's a big part of my personal mission in life, is to bring some of these things to the light so that they're not hidden. And when they're hidden, there's a lot of shame and different things that come from them that are just hurtful. And so,
so my father passed away when I was 14, and then my oldest brother is the one that took his life, 2.5, almost 3 years ago. When you are working, I consider myself successful. I've had a business for 20 years. We have a good family. There's people that are more successful and there's people that are less successful. I'm very happy with my life. We've done well from a business standpoint, and I feel like I have good kids. And so, but you do still find in the middle of that, it's like, oh, hang on, what is that? What is that thing I feel, or that thing that maybe I haven't dealt with? When you're talking with maybe high performers, they're big, they're strong, they're capable men on the outside. And I've heard you talk about, sometimes we just lift more weight to put that kind of shield around us because maybe we don't want to open up. And I think I've always struggled, I shouldn't say struggled. I've been having the conversation of like, what's the right balance of just being strong and being I teach my son, be a provider, be a protector. Like that's one of the hallmarks, in my opinion, of a good man. But also you need to be able to like pause. And my conversations with my daughter are different than the conversations with my son because there's different expectations. So when you're having conversations with some, men, like, what are some things that people can do to help like recognize, oh, like maybe I should pause, because if you're dealing with someone who's, like you said, it's like kind of 60% and they're trying to get that last 40%, what are some indicators that maybe I'm not achieving all my potential?
Yeah, a lot of people they'll come with like they're distracted, they're overwhelmed, they're anxious, they're lacking motivation, they're tired. Those are like symptoms of something else.
Yeah.
And so recognizing what's causing those, and it can be a misalignment with what their values are. Like I do a lot of values-based coaching, and
Okay.
at a lot of workshops, I'll ask people what their values are, and I'll say, raise your hand if you can name your values right now, and I might get one or two hands up, but a lot of people don't, or they'll have like ideas on themes like I value honesty or like love, and those are great, but how do you know that you're being more loving or more honest from a day-to-day basis?
They're just vague enough to where it's hard to be accountable.
Right. And so like with coaching, it's all about accountability. And first off, it's with me, and then I want you to want to be accountable to yourself and to your friends and community. But I like a values-based way of kind of living your life. And so looking at what are the things that you say you value, the life that you want, and then what are the things that you're doing that aren't in alignment with those values. And I break it down to like hours a day. Like how many hours a day are you spending doing things that you don't value?
Do you have like look at their calendar?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you the exercise I do. If you're curious. So it's called Deathbed Values.
Okay.
And I have people close their eyes and think about like many years from now, maybe 100 years from now, you're down on your deathbed and you're looking back and you're reviewing your life. And from this moment on, you've lived a perfect life. You have no regrets. You wouldn't change anything about your life. Your family's by your side, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, your friends. You're just like, I crushed it. From this moment, I've lived a perfect life. What are the actions, the things that you spent your most valuable asset, your time, doing? And so people will think, okay, I'll write down, these few things that I've done, and then I'll have them put those into different buckets. And that's what will be called your activity values. So mine are my business and the impact that I have, my health and my wellness, my quality time with friends and family, flow or peak experiences, which would be like travel or states of awe, like when you get to the top of a mountain and you're just like, wow, I can't believe I'm here and my body can do this. Like that's a peak experience. And then learning. So anything that's involved learning. So ideally for me, I don't spend any time ever doing anything outside of those values. Okay. And so I will go back and do an audit. And so if you're listening to this or watching this, thinking about what are those buckets, you can steal my 5. I don't own them. But how much time are you spending doing things outside of that? Like one thing that's not there is like mindlessly scrolling Instagram, mindlessly watching TV. And so as you start to eliminate these things, you create space for the things that you do value. And once you start to move that, it skyrockets your confidence, yourself, the way you view yourself, all of those things. So it's like a real practical exercise that you can do, you can track, you can hold yourself accountable to. Yeah.
So like, I want to revisit a couple of those, but when you talk about, just being mindlessly on Instagram, we've all fell, victims of that. Now, like watching a TV show, I'm not a big TV guy. And so, but like if you have a spouse and you like have a show and you're watching it together and you're like talking and you're laughing, you're engaging, it's kind of like, it's a thing that you're doing. Obviously you don't want to do that all the time, but it may be a way to decompress. Do you find yourself ever watching any kind of TV, or do you just kind of like, I'm not really interested in it at all?
So like if it's a value to you and you find that that's a way that you like to connect, then I'm not going to tell your values are wrong. Like for me, I don't own a TV.
Really?
So I haven't owned TV for a long time. So I don't find value in that, but I do have a projector. So I do sometimes like to watch a movie. Or like, watch something, but it's more intentional. So I like have to pull down the projector, set it up. It's an event. I'll get the popcorn, we'll get everything ready, and we're watching because we're wanting to do that and wanting to connect with ourselves in that way.
Because that could be like a family or friends. Like it's an event. It's like going to a movie, but you're just doing it at your house.
I love that. It's never like, I don't know what to do. I'm just like put the TV on and then I'm just like zombie in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably equivalent to like eating healthy, right? Like if you don't want to eat junk food, don't keep junk food in the house. If you don't want to,
I mean, it's really hard. Like, in a lot of these like technology companies, like Facebook or Netflix or whatever, they have billions of, maybe more, of dollars designed towards keeping our attention.
Yeah.
And so to tell yourself, like, I'm just not going to watch, I'm not going to do it, it's really hard.
No,
like, I struggle with that every single day.
Yeah.
But so I have to take extreme measures on it. Like, something I'm just ordered for my house is a lockbox for my phone. So I will put my phone now in this lockbox during certain hours, so I'm not even tempted to look at it.
Yep.
And it also adds to the people that I'm around. It's like, hey, you can see that I'm putting this phone in this box.
Prioritizing.
I'm not prioritizing you.
Yeah.
Like the time I'm spending with you, I'm not on my phone or thinking about it or checking a message or whatever it is. And I'm not perfect, but I strive to move towards all of that.
Recognizing, right? So you're putting things in place. And that's something, I mean, we talk about even with deficiencies. When I say deficiencies, that's things that maybe I'm not as good at, you know? So like with dyslexia, I'm not good at reading. So like, what are the tools that I can use to help fill that gap? And so if you notice, like, I'm spending too much time doing this, it's like, what are the tools I can use to help me become the person that I want to become, you know, for myself and then also the people around me?
I think that's that's what makes things really fun, because there's so many resources on how to do things.
Gamify.
That, like, there's no right way to do anything. It's just the right way that works for you.
Yeah.
And if you allow yourself to be creative enough and try different things,
Yeah.
then life becomes really fun, because you can always have that, like, beginner's mentality.
I love that. Small rabbit trail. How does that work? You have a young man in your house, your stepfather, and you kind of play a father role. How does that work with a young person in the house, not having a TV? Any specific challenges that just pop to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think kids spell what I've learned. So I've been in his life for almost half his life. He's 8 now, and I've met him when he was just turned 5.
Okay.
And the way that he spells love is Time.
Yeah.
And so if I'm spending time with him and engaged with him, he doesn't want to watch TV. He would much rather wrestle than watch a TV or be on an iPad or anything like that.
It's an active life too.
So as long as I can set up my schedule in order so that when I'm with him, I can be present, we're going to have a great time.
Yeah.
It's not always the case, but I strive for that as much as possible.
I love that. All right, so I'm going to grab some notes here, and I've made a couple notes about different things that just wanted to make sure that we hit on during the conversation. And you know, one of the things it's funny, I wanted to actually talk about this because part of what we talk about is dyslexia, and part of the trouble with dyslexia is memorization. So one of the questions I actually have, and I'll go into what I was going to say here in a minute. What is your understanding of dyslexia? What is dyslexia?
Yeah, so I'm not a dyslexia pro, of course, my understanding is you learn differently, and the brain works differently, and it's more challenging on things like memory or recall or reading.
Okay.
But you're also very creative and can think outside the box, and that would be
that's pretty spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, we often describe it on the channel as operating system. It's kind of like the difference between a Mac and a PC. And so it technically is a neurological condition. And so you literally process information differently. You see things differently. And so there's all kinds of different stuff we could say about that. But it's always interesting when I talk to people about dyslexia, because a lot of times it's like, you flip letters around and they think that's like the extent of it. But there's a lot of other aspects to it, and there's great books out there, and we talk about that on a lot of other videos. So either that's
I think it's definitely worth talking, like, and I'm sure you do this, like highlighting the strengths of it, because
100%.
I was, when I was younger, I was diagnosed with a sleeping disorder, and I had to go to speech pathology for a long time because I would like mumble my words. I didn't have confidence. I never thought I was a great student, but I loved to learn. I just didn't like to learn in the way of school and in that aspect. And so it's taken me a while to like identify myself as like an academic and someone who enjoys learning and enjoys like not necessarily reading all the time about things, but like when there's things I'm really interested on, I will go deep and become like an
I
expert
love
on
that because I hated school because I wasn't good at it. But I consider myself someone who loves to learn. And it's funny, it's like once you get out of like the cookie cutter system that they kind of set up for us, is like, oh, we actually really enjoy learning new things and experimenting and trying new things, but we just don't want to necessarily sit in a desk and do it the way that you think it should be done.
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, the boy I live with, he struggles with that. Like, we're getting him tested for dyslexia.
Okay.
And so he struggles with, like, reading and comprehension and some of these things, but he's really smart and he's curious and he wants to do those things, but it's,
Yeah.
challenging because we want him to feel confident.
Yeah.
And he's, learns differently than other kids. But
Yeah.
in my opinion, I view that as like a superpower for him because he can think
100%.
outside the box and see all of these things and be super creative. There aren't always opportunities for him to do that in school. And so I want to prioritize giving him those opportunities outside of school.
Yeah.
And like, I coach his flag football team, and two of the
Okay.
words that I bring onto the team are the 2 E's, and they're effort and encouragement.
Yeah.
And I really want to encourage him through his effort, yes, in football, but also like in building things downstairs or art or just creativity. Like there's no right way to do anything. There's just, you can try it. And if you have the flexibility and you feel like you're allowed to try, then you're going to really learn a lot faster.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I try to talk to my kids about that. So I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. My son, who's 18, he's on the spectrum, high functioning, and a whole nother conversation about like what is autism, and again, but it's just a lot about like how you process and see the world. Brilliant. And then my daughter, who maybe doesn't love school and academically maybe a little bit more of a struggle just because she's more creative, but she's already written her first book,
Yeah.
And so like recognizing what the strengths are and leaning into those and then using those to learn, I think is so valuable for confidence as well. And again, it goes back to the story I was talking about, earlier. One of the reasons we started the DH was I didn't want my daughter to feel insecure. I didn't want my son, but when I learned that my son wasn't dyslexic, then I was like, oh, okay. But then it turned out my daughter was, and I was just, I didn't want there to be a stigma. I didn't want her to be insecure. And then just all kinds of bad things come out of, when people are insecure and don't trust, and they seek affirmation in ways that aren't healthy, and
Sure.
And things like that. So I love that approach. One of the things, a quote that I love is from Mark Cuban. Sorry, my mind went blank. He talks about college, and one of the quotes that, and I may get this off a little bit, but he's like, the point of college is to learn how to learn. I did not go to college, but I really liked that statement, that quote. And so in your experience with, men, women, just life, working with athletes, what could you say about that statement, just about learning how you learn, learning how your body responds? What have been some important things? Have there been important things about mental and physical, just saying like, oh, my body responds differently when I do that? Or talk to me a little bit about learning.
Yeah. I mean, when you were talking, the word that popped up for me was curiosity.
Yeah.
So you have to allow yourself to be curious, which in order to be curious, you have to feel safe. You have to feel comfortable to be curious. Yeah. And so if you're judging yourself, you're not feeling safe and you're not going to feel like you're allowed to be curious. And so most of the time, if you have people around you that love and care about you, they want you to try things. They want you to be curious.
Yeah.
And so often I'll support people just saying, hey, who are you worried about feeling like an idiot in front of?
Yeah.
Do you think they would really care? No. Okay. Can you talk to them that you want to try cooking Thai food because you love Thai food and it might stink, and if it does, you can order pizza?
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Shoot them a text right now. Well, right now we're on the phone. Yeah, shoot them a text. Okay, they shoot them a text. They say, yeah, great. Let's try it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, cool. I like the ability to fail.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's, I think, really important, is figuring out what are the friction points that are stopping you from being able to do things that you're into,
Yeah.
and then how can you break those down? And now you have a platform to play on, to think, okay, what am I curious about?
Yeah.
Like an exercise I often have people do if they're working on finding out what they're passionate about, what their purpose is write out 30 things that they've ever been curious or passionate about in their life. And if you're struggling with that, which a lot of people do, because 30
say,
things is a lot.
Yeah.
And in order to know if you're passionate or curious, you wouldn't mind, watching a talk about it for 20 or 30 minutes, or watching a documentary, or learning about it in those types of ways, or reading if you like to read. And getting as detailed as you can with those. So like for the example I gave with cooking, like instead of writing I'm curious about cooking, right, I'm curious about Thai noodle dishes. And then maybe you like order special ingredients from Thailand and you try making something that you really enjoy. All of that, within that, there's so much growth that can happen for you mentally and emotionally, because you're putting yourself out there. You're trying something. And then ideally, if it's food, you're sharing it with others too.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot with my body physically, and a lot of that is I'm being curious. Like, can I hold a certain amount of weight over my head? Can I do a Turkish get up with this amount of weight? No one's ever done it before.
Yeah.
I can't. There's no guidebook on how to do that, but let me break down. This is the goal I have, and let me work backwards and like reverse engineer it in order to see if that happens. And I'll learn things along the way. And for me, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I would think that a lot of business people would very much resonate with that concept. Like, this is where we want to be, reverse engineer how to get there.
Yeah.
What do you find is difficult for someone to do that with, maybe on a more personal level or an emotional level, if they're trying to get there, like failure, but yeah, I guess like I said, it's easy to kind of lay it out in black and white. When you're talking about money, it's like, it's easy feedback loop. What do you find are kind of the blockers in the problems that high successful people have when they're trying to get more introspective?
Yeah. So you need a goal. So maybe I'll make one up. Maybe, and tell me if you come up with one that's more specific, but like someone wants more confidence, say with their wife or their partner.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
What are the guidelines on like, how do you know that you're more confident with them or not?
Okay.
Right. So
I love this.
What would it feel like for you to be more confident? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
And then they're like, I feel like I would feel comfortable saying how I really feel to them, or being able to, like, I love them and I think that they're attractive, but it's hard for me to verbally articulate that to them. Okay. Why is that hard for you? I don't have a lot of practice doing it. Great. Oh, do you want to try? Yeah, I do. Cool. Can you have a conversation with them that you want to try doing this, and it might not come off in the way that they want or be perfect, but you're committed to that growth mindset of improving on it? Yeah, I can ask them that. Okay, great. So now you've broken down the fear that they're going to judge you for it. You've created a spot for you to do that. And then you can continue to take that down. Like, say it's hard for you to come up with something in the moment, right? Yeah. If you think of something afterwards, write that down, because we can't remember. Like you used an analogy before.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we need to write. I do. I need to write stuff down. And so I have no shame in writing it down and then saying later, hey, can I read you something that I was thinking about you earlier today? And then I'll read it, and then I'll probably elaborate on it as I'm reading it, but I have a little structure there to help guide
kind of sparks the conversation.
Yeah. And then that's going to go really well, because of course people, when you share something that you love or you appreciate about them, they feel good. And now, bam, you have more confidence with your partner.
I think just the act of like, hey, I had something I want to share, I forgot, and just like bringing out the note almost shows like a little of like vulnerability too, especially in a situation where you're maybe dealing with someone that you're interested in romantically, or just trying to explore that relationship.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, the things that most people want, they're good. They're like good things. You know what I mean? And so as long as you have the capacity to share that, and the strength, like I call it emotional fitness, and we could talk about like the men's groups and stuff, because that's a way that I'll kind of help people work on that. Yeah. It can bring down the guard. And once you've shared it a few times, now you start to get those reps. And just like in the gym, when you first started working out, it was like really sore, but you got a lot of reps really fast. You got stronger pretty quick. It's the same thing in this emotional realm where, finances are easier to track. Like, oh, I'm improving. Yeah. And how do you track the emotional or the confidence level going?
Yeah. I think same way, in business, in the business where we talk a lot about like feedback loops and improving the processes and iterating. And I think a lot of times we leave off some of the personal stuff. Let's talk about the men's groups, because now is this the men's group part of like when you join the offense? I don't know if there's like different layers, but is that part of the offering with the offense coaching?
Yeah, I'm going to tap on one thing you just said, and I'll answer
Yeah.
that. So the feedback is so important.
Yeah.
A major pillar of the offense, which is the mindset coaching company, is positive psychology.
Okay.
Positive psychology is the science of human flourishing. So what helps someone flourish in their life or become more well? And one of the aspects of that is flow states. Flow states are when you're completely engaged in the moment. Maybe you're experiencing flow state now where time kind of slows down. I know I kind of am.
Yeah.
It's hard to, if you're thinking that you're in flow state, you're not actually in it. But we'll flow in and out of that. But having feedback of knowing like, am I on or am I off is an important aspect of that. And then you become more engaged and then you want to do that action more. And so I just want to mention that feedback, because when you're say you're trying to improve your relationship or your marriage, having feedback is important, because you want to know like, hey, did that work? Like when I was telling you those things, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So two things on the flow state. I have actually some. I want to have a whole like little conversation about flow state.
We'll dive back.
We'll go back into that, but like the feedback loop when like even I've been married 21 years today actually, and so when I'm having a conversation with my wife, sometimes I have the tendency, it's like I fix problems all day in my business. And so like she's telling me a problem and I'm like, here, let me fix it. She's like, actually, I don't want you to fix it. I just wanted to be able to talk to you. And it's like knowing, that's a feedback loop. And now when I just did it the other day, it's kind of a joke now. It's like, are you just wanting to vent or do you want me to do something? She's like, no, I'm just wanting to talk. I was like, perfect, I'm here.
I've heard that story a lot.
Yeah.
But it's great that you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I can immediately go into that mode, which is a great mode as long as it's wanted.
Yeah.
And there's times with me too, where I want to just be heard.
Yeah.
And that will bring me to the men's group.
Yeah.
So I've led men's groups for 6 years now. And at first they were paid men's groups where let me break down the offense first.
Okay,
so
yeah.
The offense is the name of the company, and then within that is all different types of coaching. So it's mainly one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
There was group coaching, but I've changed that to just in-person men's group. So the one-on-one coaching is with me. We go over your life in this holistic fashion, look at your physical health, your mental health, emotional, environmental, all these different aspects of what makes you you. And then based on the goals and the struggles you have, we'll have a phone call once per week. We'll go over those different aspects, and I'll challenge you to hold you accountable towards taking actions towards the goals and the dreams that you have.
Yeah, and this is something that you've been doing with actors, athletes, professionals.
All walks of life.
Yeah, and local people who maybe are just trying to be a better person, a better father, a better husband. Students. Okay.
I mean, it really runs the gamut.
Yeah. The reason I bring up the athletes and stuff, I think, it's easy to go online. You see a lot of different things out there, and I want people to know, like, this is a special guy. Like this, you're getting an opportunity to work with someone who is not just like threw up a slogan on Instagram and paid for some followers. This is a guy that has worked with the highest performing people, in some cases in the world. And so now you've it seems like maybe you're doing a little less physical in doing that, but you're also trying to balance that with the mindfulness and just the personal work as well. Would that be true?
100%. I mean, my career started in strength and conditioning, and I was lucky. The New York Jets came to my college for training camp, and I was able to work with their strength and conditioning staff for 2 training camps. And then, so I was working with like the best athletes in the world. Like LaDainian Tomlinson was there, and one of the first days I was there, the strength coach was like, "Hey, go teach LT how to do kettlebell swing." And he's such a great athlete because even though I was a young guy, he was like really engaged and listening to me and like picking up on my cues. And so
life lesson right there.
100%. And so then Yeah, I parlayed that. I went out to California. I was training guys for the NFL Combine, which is basically the tryout before you get to the NFL. They test your 40-yard dash, your vertical jump, your bench press, all these different things. And I was supporting the coaches and the athletes there in order to, run tenths of a second faster, which then gets you drafted a few points higher, which then makes you more millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that was great. But what I found I really loved was this in-between part of what I call the field house and the weight room. So we usually do the speed work first, and then as we're walking into the weight room, you're talking to the athletes about more of the interpersonal stuff, like their relationships or how they're thinking about getting to the NFL or their homies that they got to help support or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I managed a strength and conditioning facility in New York after that, and then I went off to travel the world. I saved up some money, took my backpack and bought a one-way ticket and traveled to many different countries and continents to study what I called an alternative graduate studies program. So again, took the learning into my own hands, didn't get an official certificate from a university, but got a lot of knowledge on all of these different aspects of what makes people thrive and flourish. And so when I work with people now, since then I've done a lot of certifications and specializations in different things, but I'll pull these different exercises and then be able to create a program for someone.
Okay.
And
so you can just kind of pull from all this knowledge, this library of information and experience that you have.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you work with a trainer or you go to the gym. There's so many different exercises you can do. There's thousands of online fitness coaches that showing you every different thing. How do you know what's right?
Yeah.
And so, but there are certain movements that are tried and true and they work.
Yeah.
Like your squats are going to work. Your deadlifts are going to work. Your push-ups are going to work. Like your pull-ups are going to work. You don't need to be standing on a Bosu ball with one eye closed. Doing like those are fun, and like fun is important.
And you may see some of that fun stuff on your Instagram.
Yeah, I like being creative and exploring.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing.
It's not what you need to do every day necessarily.
Yeah, it's the same thing in the mindset world. So there's certain exercises and certain themes that are tried and true, and there's a lot of science behind them. And so when I work with people, it's like these are the meat and potatoes of the things that we really need to do in order to move the needle in your life.
Yeah.
And one of those is gratitude. Like it's been scientifically proven that gratitude is higher than like love or hope or bravery or courage in order on moving the needle on how you feel about yourself.
Wow.
And so how do you truly feel grateful? You can't just sit there and be like, feel grateful. You got to practice. And an exercise I like is called the 4 W's.
Yeah.
So you write down what went well and why.
Yeah.
And the why aspect helps you take ownership over the things that are going well in your life.
Yeah.
So after a while, you start to think, wow, I can create, taking ownership, that growth mindset, the positive things that are happening in my life. Like, sweet. And then you start to create more of those opportunities. And before you know it, you feel grateful about the life that you're living.
Yeah, I love that. Now, sorry, and we kind of went on
a
little
side.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry.
I love that. I love that. But so how do you integrate that with the men's group?
Okay,
men's group. And the reason I brought up all that other stuff is I just want people, anytime I'm with someone that I recognize like greatness, just talent and giftings and however you want to describe it. I just want people to recognize like there's something here. So either way, that's why I'm glad you went into that, because it's super important to understand that there's people that who do it really well, and then there's people who just kind of play around the edges, and you're fully immersed. And so either way, I'm trying to convey that. So tell us about your men's group.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so there's the one-on-one coaching, and then the men's group that I've been running for the past year plus is in person at my house. So what I found that people really, men specifically, are struggling with is the ability to share vulnerably what they're feeling. And when I grew up, I had 3 main feelings: happy, mad, and sad. Yeah. And so if I was frustrated, that would go to mad. And then I would never actually get to communicate while I was frustrated. I'd never be able to be seen for my frustration. And then I would never be able to connect with the person I want to connect with. Yeah. And so that could lead to feeling lonely. Yeah. And I want to feel lonely. I want to connect. So I wanted to create a space where guys could come, they could express whatever they want to get off their chest, and other guys are going to hold that space for them. And so what it looks like is I tell everyone, bring a camping chair, and come outside, now it's cold. It's February and almost February in Colorado, so there's snow on the ground. So bring your boots, dress warm.
Yeah.
We'll sit in a circle. I feed everyone. So
Okay.
I smoke like 30 pounds of meat and
Okay.
potatoes and a bunch of stuff, which is helpful to get the guys to come. And so we eat, and then after we eat, we, again, are in that circle, and I pass out a list of like 50 feelings. It's a feelings list. And so we look at that for a few minutes. I give a talk kind of like I'm giving now of like, hey, this is a space. I set some guidelines, like there's no phones, there's no recording, there's no interrupting, there's no giving advice or suggestions. You're just looking at the person who's speaking, and then afterwards can say thanks for sharing, and then move on to the next guy. 2 to 4 minutes per each person, and it's been really impactful.
Wow.
So I felt like there's never there's not always those like, what's the right time to share something you're struggling with. And so once a month, this is the right time. And from that, I have an app that I use with the offense, and so I put all the guys in this app too, so now they can connect with each other. And if they want to share something more, they can just say, hey man, can we have I call it emotional fitness. I'm like, can we have an emotional fitness session?
Okay.
And they're like, yeah, sure. Easy.
And you just kind of talk through whatever it is they're wanting to talk about.
Yeah. So for me, it's a free thing. I mean, I ask for a $10 donation for the food, but I just want to, I've had other people in my life that have by, and when that happens, my experience is you don't know why they do that. You don't know. And there's a lot. And I do believe that in some instances, there wasn't a space to communicate, at least for them, how they really were feeling. And so they felt like that's the best option. And I wanted to just have a space for guys to practice, which is really the key here. It's like you practice communicating your feelings, because if you don't do that, then it's going to feel uncomfortable. And you're going to lean into probably some like childhood behavior that's most likely not going to be received well from the person you're sharing it with. And then you're going to get a feedback loop of sharing my feelings isn't good. And then it's just going to lead down to a path where you don't share anything. And you find, other sources of coping that usually aren't the healthiest. And so I'm like, guys, this is a chance. We can just practice. Like read the list, any feelings that come up, just practice sharing it. And it's been awesome. Like guys they're practice. They like work through it, and there's no right or wrong way to do it.
You just talk.
Talk. And it's rare that you talk and have like 30 other guys just listening to you. And then after we all go around, if there are suggestions or things that guys want feedback on, they can raise their hand and say, hey, check out this book or check out this resource or whatever it may be. But
typically at that point is the guy requesting feedback.
So
if we'll
go through once, no feedback. And then afterwards, thanks everyone. If there's anyone that wants feedback on anything they share, raise your hand.
I love that. I mean, there's so many parallels to, just what we call regular life. If you want to get stronger, you do more reps,
Sets and reps.
If I want to be a better salesperson, I just do it more, make more phone calls. I talk to more people. And sometimes we forget about some of the things that are more important,
the thing that you're saying is you have to do it.
You have to do it.
You have to take the action. And what happens so often is like people consume so much content, and it feels good. It feels good to hear things that or that are reinforced with what you believe, which is great. But if you don't apply those things, then it's almost like a double negative. Because you're hearing the things that you want to be doing. Don't get me. I'll tell you about that word in a second. And not applying it, and then that harms your confidence. And that's like creating debt in your self-confidence account.
100%. Talk about should. I've heard you talk about this. A little bit,
so should is the word should is a gray word. So it's not based in taking any action. And so like, I should work out more. I should eat healthier. I should make more money. I should whatever. We all have shoulds, and they're all based on external expectations, either from our parents, our friends, social media. I'm trying to never should on you. I'll give you things that I suggest. But the difference with you should do this versus I suggest this is I'm taking ownership over my suggestion versus putting that onto you. And so when you eliminate the word should and insert the words want or don't want, you immediately take ownership over your language and then you take ownership over your actions and ownership over your life. And so if you're listening to this podcast, please never use the word should. And like, I will try it for a week, do a should fast. Like, I love it. Absolutely life-changing.
Yeah. There's a guy that I follow, Alex Ramosi. He's a big business guy, and he's in fitness too, but he's more in the business space, I would say. And he talks a lot about that. He talks about just like removing, like, he's like, well, should I do this? He's like, well, I'm not going to say you should. Like, you could, like, you can, It's like, if you want to be a great salesperson, then you need to make a lot of sales calls. If you want to make more money, then you should do the activity that makes more money. If you want to be better emotionally, then you need to do the activity that makes you more open. I absolutely love that. There was a couple things I want to pull out my notes here and just look. I love the vulnerability. And one of the things that we hear talked a lot about, and just online, and you hear a lot about masculinity, toxic masculinity, and what is a man? What are the responsibilities and all that? And obviously, I think a lot of that depends on what your life looks like, who you're married to, and what the expectations are, and all that. But when you're talking to these individuals, and again, we're not saying should, but what do you think are important things and we're talking about men specifically, for us to consider and look at? You hear people online talk about, I've heard it say, like, if you're struggling with depression, get a six-pack. It's hard to be depressed and have a six-pack. I'm like, okay, well,
I know a lot of depressed people with six-packs.
Yeah, so like probably not, And like, I understand like the shock value there, but it's just like, that seems like really stupid advice. And then I've seen salespeople, like these sales coaches, and they're like, oh, you're undisciplined because you got belly fat. And it's like, well, he's probably got 4 kids, and he's also working a full-time job and can't spend 6 hours at the gym and doesn't have a chef, And so what is just some, like, someone who maybe can't start your program, for whatever reason, and is looking at this, or maybe it's a young man who is in school, maybe he's a little overweight or this or that, or just awkward, maybe just doesn't fit in well. Like, what would be some advice? Just like, hey, like, try this, consider this thought, consider this activity. What are your thoughts?
I do think there's a lot to be said for physicality and moving energy through your body, for sure. But there's a great book that I often refer when I think about masculinity. It's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Okay.
So it's these 4 archetypes of the complete masculine psyche.
Okay.
And so king energy would be taking care of your finances, taking care of your kingdom, making sure your home is safe. That would be in your true king. Warrior energy would be like the physicality, like making sure if someone comes in, you can handle yourself, you're physically strong, healthy, and capable. Magician energy is your connection to something greater than yourself. It could be spirituality. Okay. It could be your connection with creativity.
Okay.
And then lover energy is the amount that you're passionate about your life. So do you rush through food and watching TV while eating it, or are you able to really absorb that? Are you able to be sensual with your life? It doesn't have to mean sexual, but it can be like, how into things can you get?
Yeah.
And there's shadows of all of those different ones, but it's a nice framework when you're reflecting on, okay, what kind of man do I want to be? How am I doing in these 4 categories? And almost like using it as a rubric.
Yeah.
And then saying, okay, maybe my warrior energy is great. I've spent a ton of time in the gym, very strong. I don't need to dive any more into that if I want to work on my overall masculinity. Maybe my lover energy is down. So what can be things that I can allow myself to be creative with or curious about? How can I improve that aspect? Or my king energy is down. Maybe I struggle with my finances. So can I read a book? Can I listen to some finance podcasts? What actions can I take to set up a 401k or whatever it may be? Yeah. That's going to start to deposit more of the chips into that king energy. And before you know it, you start to feel, well in that area. So
I love that. Yeah, kind of breaking it down into 4 segments and then determining which area maybe the lack is. Because for the most part, people probably are not lacking in all 4. I'm sure we never arrive probably, but you can identify like, oh, like, hey, I just feel I don't feel like I'm providing well, or I don't feel like I'm motivated, or, and so you can kind of walk through that. And what was the name of that book?
King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Okay, I love that.
Just the name of all four.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me pull up my notes here again, because I wanted to, I just think masculinity and men, it's obviously near to my heart. I have a son, and I like my guy friends, and I want to see them. I want to see them represent. I want my brothers to represent, us well, and I want us to be strong, physically, mentally, and be able to help people. Really, the Dyslexic Hustle, like, there's no. We're not selling anything. We don't make any money. This is all just money spent, And so the whole goal is just to help people and make people feel more confident. And if you struggle with something, to be a resource. So either way, it's just I've liked your energy. I heard you talk about this on a podcast where you were at an event at your girlfriend's work, and they were like, "Oh, he's very he's gentle." I think maybe yeah was the word they used. And like at first you're like, "Man, I don't want to be gentle," But then you talked about, tell that story just in the conversation.
Yeah, no, I heard someone overheard someone talking and described me as gentle.
Okay.
And in the moment I was like, gentle, like I want to be a beast, like I want to be strong. But gentle, there's a lot of vulnerability that goes into that. And so having being able to be in all of these different instances, I think, is a great aspect of masculinity. And being able to recognize what is the appropriate energy for the circumstance is very important. And being able to zoom out, constantly look at, okay, what's the bigger picture here? How can I show up? And there's a great TED Talk on the bystander approach, which is if you're, kind of gets into like the locker room talk thing more or less. And so if you're around, say you're around a guy, you overhear someone talking about maybe a woman or his weekend conquest in like a negative light. For me, I want to respect women. I don't want them to be broken down in that type of way. So, but if I don't say anything, then I'm allowing that to be okay. And I don't have to like fight this guy and tell him to stop, but I can say, if I'm in the group, I can be like, hey man, I know that, this is something that you might value, but I don't really appreciate, I have a sister, a mother, like let's not talk about women in this way.
100%.
And that can be very uncomfortable, especially if feel like you're the only one doing that, but that's a lot of strength in my mind. That's way more strength than lifting in the corner of the gym with your headphones on. And so that's what I encourage people to do more of, is stick up for what things that you believe in, you care about.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, let me grab my notes here. Let's look at some other stuff here. I love your definition, or just your take on masculinity. That's because people can look at just pictures on Instagram and be like, oh, this big strong guy, but then it's a gentle spirit. And so kudos to you for that. I love that. I love that.
Well, it's fun for me. I like expressing as an athlete. Some people like to express as an artist, or like to express culinarily, or however, but being able to use that to get across this message really is a big part. That's why I like to do the Turkish get up world record. It's like, it gets a lot of views or a lot of things to see someone do a Turkish get up with that much weight. But if I can use that to then gain your eyeballs and then redirect you towards like loving yourself or your brothers or whoever, your family, in a different way, that to me is where the win is. And what's difficult is that, and where it's fun with the group, is that guys can share those things. Like, no one would know about that bystander approach if you had that conversation with someone and stood up for what you believe in. That's not going on Instagram. That's not going. No one knows about that. And before you probably said something, you probably had a ton of butterflies, super nervous. It can be difficult to create seemingly conflict in that way, but you standing up for what you believe in greater than your fear of being outcasted, that is like where it's all about. And so I love championing people who, before you vulnerably say what you appreciate about your wife or your girlfriend or whoever, it can be nerve-wracking. But to overcome those feelings and say that is like what I want to support more people doing.
Absolutely. As someone who has a sister and has a daughter, like I think about that. It's like you want people. I want my friends. I want the people that she is friends with to be comfortable standing up, and making her feel protected in public, but then also in private. It's like, I don't want you saying certain things. No, I so love that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
for doing that. Yeah, I appreciate it. So one thing that you mentioned, the last two values that you talked about, what were those? You talked about
It was peak experiences, flow states,
yeah,
and then learning.
learning. So we talked a lot about learning, and so peak experience and flow state. I'd love to hit on that just as we kind of start to bring this to an end. Flow state is something that I've been interested in past couple years. There's been a couple books that I've read about flow states. There's one called Catching Fire. Have you ever heard of that? Okay. And there's a lot of talk about like flow states, and they talk about natural flow states. They also talk about doing it through psychedelics and things like that, which I would be interested to like have a conversation about psychedelics if you're interested. Earlier we talked about mental health. And I'll touch on this just briefly, is there's been a lot of research going into psychedelic work with people with PTSD or just depression, addiction. My brother actually went through some treatment. I think it was a ketamine facility. It was all doctor. It was all done right, done the way it should be done, in the sense that you don't just want to be out,
Set and setting.
And there's another conversation to be had about that, but I just throw that out there for anyone that maybe was a part of the mental health, the more extreme side. There's some resources out there, so check into that. Talk to me a little bit about flow state. There's different flow states. I'm learning about it, and I ski, and so you try to experience that. I do experience sometimes as a guitar player, as a musician, you can kind of feel that sometimes. Talk to me a little bit about just flow states.
Yeah, so I love you brought up Catching Fire. That's Stephen Kotler, the author of that.
Okay, yeah.
I've done his high flow coaching certification. It's
really?
like a 6-month program that you go through, and there's a lot of science behind how to get into flow states. But essentially, what a flow state is that feeling where you're completely engaged in the moment, time slows down, and you're enjoying the thing that you're in. And so oftentimes it gets described through music or sports because there's a challenge that's met with your skill. And so the challenge skills balance is one of my favorite ways to describe it, just because it's easy to understand. And if you have a graph, on one axis is the challenge in front of you. Maybe that's the black diamond. And then the other graph is your skill. So how often you've been skiing, or your skiing skill. And so if you've never skied before, your skill is going to be low. And if you go on a black diamond, the challenge is really high, so you're going to be anxious. Yeah. But now if you have been skiing for a while and you're very proficient at it, and I say, okay, we're going to go skiing, but we're only going to ski the bunny hill, that challenge is going to be really low, and you're going to become bored. Yeah. But if I say, hey, we're going to ski this black diamond, there's some powder, maybe some moguls, that might be just enough challenge for you to need to use all of your skill, and now you're in flow state. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about, playing music, I'm sure you're playing certain pieces that are challenging for you and require all of your skill so that you're engaged in it. Yeah. If you had to play, I'm making up, like Happy Birthday, that might be too low of a challenge for you, and so you're not going to be able to enjoy that moment. So always trying to modulate what is the challenge and what is my skill, and how can I make that appropriate for whatever it is I'm doing across literally everything that you do.
Really?
So cooking, like anything that you do. I have this mantra that I love from one of my mentors, Dan Millman, who wrote the book Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
Okay.
A great book. But he has this idea in there of practicing everything. Mm-hmm. So the way that you do the dishes, the way that you put on your clothes, the way you get dressed, the way you brush your teeth, like bringing intention into it can really enhance your experience with it. Yeah, but no, the practicing is more awareness, and when you're present, you're able to be in those flow states. So finding aspects of your life where you can maintain presence is critical. Yeah.
So are you able to teach flow state? Are you able, talk to me about that. You've gone through like the certification. is that something that other individuals go, obviously probably anyone can go get a certification, but does that help you be able to teach individuals how to get into a flow state?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's like one of the the many tools in the toolbox that
Gotcha.
will pull off. But when you're in flow state, it feels great. And so you want to try to be in flow state as much
All
as
the time.
possible.
Yeah.
So, again, you can't ski every single day, but how can you get into flow state in your cubicle, in your office job? And there's a lot of ways in order to do that. One is like through different time management skills.
Okay.
And so, one we talk about a lot is just batching your work into different segments and understanding when in the day is best for you to do certain work.
Yep.
So there's this book, I think Dan Pink is the author. It's the Art of Now, or sorry, I think the science of when, or something about the word when, and when do you do certain activities that are going to be best for you. So like for me, I'm very creative right when I wake up. That is like the peak time for me to do anything creative. Usually later in the afternoon, I kind of have like a little slump. And so that's usually a time where I'll do a lot of administrative tasks because my brain's not firing on all cylinders. Now, of course I can get there. It just requires a little bit more work for me. And so if I have the opportunity to pick and choose when I do certain things, I'm going to try to set myself up for the best way possible. So I'll talk with people. I'll say, hey, how much, these are the things that you need to do for your job in the week. How much flexibility do you have in when those things get done? And oftentimes you can move things around more than you think. We get into this fixed thing of like, I have to be checking my email all of the time. And it's like, says who? Do you need to? Or what would be the problem if you responded back in 2 hours? Would that be an issue? Probably not. Okay. Do you think that every time it's called task switching. So if you're like working on something that's cognitively intensive and you've come up to a challenge, maybe you can't think of how to start the next paragraph, you're like, let me hit a quick dopamine win, let me switch to email, see what's going on. Then you come back, you've left some of your attention, this is actually called attention residue, over at your email, and now you come back to the thing that you're focusing on with maybe 95% attention.
I love that. Yeah.
And so if you do that throughout the day, like a lot of people I work with, they're like, hey, Mike, 10 a.m., I'm negative attention. So now I'm reaching for energy drinks or reaching for stimulants or reaching for just mental grit to try to push through that versus saying, hey, I'm going to check my email at the end of this work block and block my time off. And no, I'm only checking my email 3 or 4 times a day. But when I'm checking it, I'm fully in it. And then I can put it away and I don't have to think about it.
I love that. I love that. So do you ever get into medicine assisted or plant-based, assisted flow? Any thoughts, opinions?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Okay.
I've done some wilderness guiding before, and I have helped guide some people in the wilderness. This goes down a different rabbit hole, but it's all based on rites of passage. So I think you might find it interesting. So when
actually had a note about this.
Yeah. So forever humans have been going through different rites of passage in order to initiate from childhood or adolescence into adulthood. And my belief is in today's day and age, there's no true initiatory period. Like, maybe there's a bar mitzvah or a communion or a graduation or something. And yes, those are very meaningful for some people, but I don't feel like as a society, those are like, I am now a man based on that. And so when we think about, or at least the lineage that I went through was, we look at the 4 directions, so north, south, east, and west. The east energy would be like a young child, like a baby. And then later will be like a grandfather. The south would be adolescence. So like, think of your kids when they are 5 years old. They're very like, me, I want this. I don't want to share in the sandbox. Like, very egocentric, natural for that age. The west is like the wicked witch of the west, the dark night of the soul, all of the analogies that can be made with that. And then the north is your true north. Like, what's your true vision that you're meant to be sharing with the world? And so if you don't go through an initiatory period through the west, then you live in what I believe is a false north. So you may have a house, watch, cars, make YouTube videos about telling men that they need to have 6-packs, or otherwise they're lazy. You're false north because, you have those things, but you have an adolescent southern emotional capacity. Oh, wow. And so in order to fully adult, like in an emotional way, you have to go through those hard, shadowy traumatic aspects that, frankly, we all have because of the human condition, to varying degrees. And so medicine can be one way of going through that because it brings those things up to the surface and then you can learn about them. But the way I personally like doing is through nature-based psychotherapy, which is fasting. And so what I've done is go to a wild place, like up in the mountains where I don't see any other human beings, anything man-made, just pure nature. When I'm looking for my own true north, and put myself in the most honest place possible, which is nature. Like animals are going to eat, sleep, pee, have sex whenever they want to do it. They're not going to try to manipulate any way. And so I fast for 4 days, no food, just water, and do different rituals and ceremonies there. And then afterwards, my spiritual vessel is very clean and clear. And so the visions that come to me through those are very honest with what is true to my soul's essence. And so then I can take that and then hopefully have the courage to act on it. And ideally, we need elders and guides to help support us with like what that true vision is. Because it's not going to come to us as easy as like, an Instagram post or something like that. It speaks in the more subtle language through like the wind or animals or just feelings, gut feelings. So attuning to that is going to help you attune to the different attributes of your life.
Do you find like a flow state in that, or is it when you're out there and you're kind of just curious, like is there a parallel to like flow when you're in kind of that, I don't know, like hungry, kind of almost like a desperate, I don't want to say desperate, but just a stripped down state?
It's more of a surrender.
Okay.
Yeah, and less of a flow is any peak performer is in flow.
Gotcha.
And so when you're trying to perform at your peak, you want to be in flow.
Gotcha.
And so if I'm working with a client or if I'm writing a newsletter, I want to be in flow. So I'm going to set up certain instances for me to get into flow. If I am on a quest, I want to be as open and receptive to things as possible. So I'm not trying to be in that like peak performance state, but more of an acceptance.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Man, that's incredible. Have you ever done that with other people? Gone out? Okay, so you've done that by yourself and then also with other people. That's an incredible. Now, does that kind of tie into? I think I heard you mention your Native American kind of background. Does some of that tie into some of that where you discovered that? Yeah,
I mean, I have some Cherokee in my family heritage, but that's not specific to Cherokee. I think a lot of people have different types of rites of passage.
Yeah.
And like I grew up with the American Pie rite of passage. So not a great one. And had to like learn a different way and just resonate with nature. I've always resonated with nature. So when I learned that, it was very just natural for me.
That's cool. No, I love that. Well, I'm going to peek at my notes here as we bring this to a close. Yeah, that was actually rite of passage was the last thing I had noted on here. Nice. So I'm glad we touched on that. I have one, maybe two questions here, just kind of rapid fire. Matthew said this might be interesting questions for you. Before I go to that, thank you so much for just all the information. And, for anyone watching this and listening to this, check out, it's Mike Aidala, Instagram, and MikeAidala.com. Is that right?
Yeah, you can go there. It's also theoffense.co.
The Offense. Yeah, The Offense. And I appreciate you just sharing and encouraging people. I appreciate what you do in our community here, just with bringing awareness to important issues and just being a good person in our community that is, helping people get fit physically and mentally. And so either way, and then also just spending so much time with me today. So
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what is the craziest thing that you want to do? And I'm assuming we're talking about like training or accomplishment, like activity. Anything that just pops to your mind that's like, man, I've thought about this and haven't done it, but I really want to.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, get very obsessed with things, and the ones I want to do, I do. Yeah. I create a life that I get to do them, and like to support people creating a life that they get to do those things. The thing that popped into my mind is a long distance swim.
Really?
I like swimming. I like being in water. I like that like repetitive motion. I've done a lot of long distance running.
Okay.
Actually, driving up here to your house was a route that I used to run a lot, and so it was like bringing back some memories. And it's cool. Like 5 months ago, I was 40 pounds lighter.
Wow.
45 pounds lighter.
Wow.
And after running, I was like, let me focus on strength. And I switched to the other end of the spectrum. And now I'm the strongest physically I've ever been.
Wow.
And so it's cool to see kind of like what your body can do when you can put your mind around it. And now I'm not in a running state. So as I was driving up this huge hill for like 10 miles, I'm like, I literally said to myself, I'm like, body, you are incredible. like I can't believe that you were training running up and down this mountain. Like, because right now I couldn't, maybe I could do it, but I don't think about it. It seems like too far out of my range.
Yeah, we see people running it all the time. Me and my wife are always like, "Oh my gosh, it's incredible."
Yeah, I mean, there's steps to doing that, steps to making it possible for sure. And when I first started off, I mean, 3 years ago I ran 0 ultra marathons, and now I've ran over 15, a couple 100-mile races. So like, I definitely thought like those guys are crazy. They're running from something. They're running to something. Like. And then I started to, again, reverse engineer, break it down. Because I had some friends that really were into aerobic training. So I was like, oh, let me learn about that.
Yeah.
And then I ran my first ultra marathon. It was like, holy crap, I just ran an ultra marathon? Like, sweet. Like, big deposit in my self-confidence bank account. I'm like, that was hard, but like, I could do that. Let me see what I could do next.
Yeah.
50 miles, 100 miles, that's like going really far, like here to Denver and back 4 times. I'm like,
wow, when you put it in perspective like that, we're in Boulder. So that's like running from Boulder to Denver, back and forth. Wow.
But but then all of a sudden, like, I mean, I've done a couple 100-mile races. I'm like, wow.
That's crazy.
It's cool. So it shows you, like, you might think something's impossible, but it's super cliche. Like, yeah, some things might be impossible, but oftentimes we limit ourselves or put a ceiling on what we believe we can achieve. And it takes a true belief of breaking that ceiling and actively working on pushing that limit in order to get through it. And running's, for me, that's been the coolest thing about running. That's cool. And so swimming would be something similar. There's this, to answer your question, there's this pass from, I think it's the Strait of Gibraltar.
Okay.
I might be pronouncing that wrong, but you swim from Europe to Africa.
Wow.
Across the ocean. And
how many miles is it?
It's 9 miles. Okay. So it's far, but it's not crazy far.
Yeah. But swimming's a totally different thing.
It's really, that specific one's very logistical.
Okay.
For everyone that's watching, I've done this. It's called the Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis. Okay. This guy, Travis Suit, his daughter was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and he found out that to help her lungs, being near the salt water is really positive. And so he decided with his friends, like I think 13 years ago maybe now, to do a huge epic odyssey adventure and try to raise money for it. Wow. And then he's created a business and a company out of that helps. I think last year they raised almost $1 million.
Wow.
And so you can paddleboard from the Bahamas, Bimini, Bahama, 82 miles to Florida. And you don't need to be like an amazing paddleboarder in order to do this. Like, I did it training in Colorado. My friends have done it training in Colorado. You have to believe that it's possible. You have to be willing to put yourself through it. And be on a vessel for a long time. You can also do it as a relay, but I think having these big goals that might seem like crazy, but being able to break them down and have someone tell you, like, you can do this, like, try it, is really fun. Like, I'll never forget that. Like, you start at midnight and you set off and you just have a little red light and you have a support boat with you. And so you're just following this red light, paddling, 5 hours in, all of a sudden, like, it starts to get a little bit brighter. And there's only been one other time on the quest that I was awake all night, and letting your eyes just like slowly attune to the sunrise and you just see ocean. It's just ocean and sky in front of you. Like, by that time I was like on the side of the boat. So I was just seeing nothing but ocean and sky. And after a while, I'm like, holy crap, it's so bright. And the sun wouldn't come up for another 30 minutes. And when it did come up, it was like the most magical sunrise I've ever experienced in my life. Cool. Like, it was crazy cool.
And you just don't experience those things. The only time you're going to experience that out in the middle of the ocean.
What's cool is that they've created this opportunity for people to do it.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be some endurance freak in order to do this thing.
Yeah.
You just have to really want to do it.
Do something hard.
And put yourself out there. If you love the ocean, if you love paddle, you can canoe it, you can relay. Like if me and you did it, you would be on the boat, I'd be on the water. We switch every hour, and then like you're partying on the boat, like, eating sandwiches, having a good time, and then you go paddle and you get a little push from the Gulf Stream because you're going across the Gulf Stream. So you kind of like can hit that at a good angle. So there's some of that. You're getting a little bit of like support, which is nice.
All right, well, this might need to be a whole video, do a whole little vlog of us paddling from the Bahamas to Florida. That would be awesome.
I mean, there's few instances where it's set up that way. Like running is one, and ultras are one where there's organizations that are set in order to do that. Yeah. Of course, you could just go run 100 miles tomorrow. Yeah. But there's more logistics in place with that, which that's also cool on its own. Like. I just feel like I'm sharing a lot of these adventures, but they're fun. Those are those peak experiences. Yeah. One would be the Grand Canyon, going like rim to rim or rim to rim to rim, where you start at the south rim, you run down 9 miles, 7 miles along the Colorado River, and then 7 miles up to the north rim. Wow. And then you can get a 5-hour shuttle back to the south rim, or turn around and go back. And it seems crazy. It's like, 50 miles almost, and 14,000 feet or more of elevation. I mean, I think it's a little less actually. But if you're fit, if you want a goal, it's a great fall time to do it, is the best time. And so I don't know when this is coming out, but probably sometime in the spring. Yeah. And so there's plenty of time to practice. If nature's something you value, if being outside something you value, maybe you do it with a buddy. Like you're hiking, you're outside. You don't have to. You're not running the whole thing. You can't run up the Grand Canyon. Yeah. But you power hike up it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, it's sometimes just like when I hear you talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, you can just plan and train for it. Sometimes when we think about these, we see people online like, oh man, I could never do that, and sometimes it's just a mindset.
I'm telling you specifically too. Yeah. You can 100% do these things, and it's fun. I don't know. For me, it's hard to just go to the gym and do this. Yeah. It's hard to just like do squats and deadlifts and bench and pull-ups and whatever for no goal, for no like mission. The goal. And so I want to have, and these are just really fun missions where like I don't know where. Yeah. You'll never forget that when you're on your deathbed. You'll be on a podcast talking about the time you did rim to rim so passionately. Like they're fun. They're fun.
That. Oh man. So 2 things. What has been your favorite thing to train for? And then who has been your favorite person to train?
Okay, so my favorite person to train has probably been my longest client, this woman, Cheryl. Okay. She's 74 years old. Okay. And she lives everything we're talking about. She is extremely curious, loves flow states. Something like training for a handstand will be, you have to focus a lot on how you place your hands down, where the tension is, attuned to when you're actually falling out of a handstand, because you're never balanced in a handstand. You're always falling. You're just rebalancing. Okay. So if you can pick up mentally when you're falling and make the correct adjustment, then you'll stay vertical, but you're never still. Yeah. And lots of parallels to our lives. Like we're never perfect. We're just constantly making these adjustments and moving, hopefully, in this direction.
A little bit of handstand work is very like it's weird. To get oriented upside down and just be comfortable. And Matthew, our friend, always thought he's like, you're just not used to being upside down, Yeah. And either way, but yeah.
So like handstand's a great one for flow states because it's a skill and challenge. And so if I told you handstand right here, that's going to be probably too much of a challenge for your skill, and so you'll get frustrated, and then you'll be like, I can't handstand, it's not for me. Yeah. But if I showed you like this crow pose, or just how to place your hands and push into the ground, now you start to build some wins. Yeah. And so Cheryl's so great at taking things that might seem simple to the average person and bringing so much intention into them, being able to focus on like how she's pushing in her hands, what her shoulder's doing, where she's going with how she's moving her body, and then she'll accomplish great things. Like she's 74. She just ran like her first race this past year. She ran, I think it was 11 miles out in Big Sur, and we're training her now for the rim to rim.
Wow.
She's going to do, the South Rim to the North Rim.
That's incredible.
And so I'll help guide her along that way. But, it's believing in herself, putting those things in place, putting the training in place, recognizing what that's going to take. You know, different things for everyone, but saying, okay, what is the actual time commitment? What's the recovery commitment? Are those things that are possible for me? And most of the time they are, if you prioritize it. Because I've talked to a lot of folks about these values, and a lot of folks watch TV, and I'm like, hey, if you just watched 2 hours or less TV, a week, and inserted these things, now you're able to have these experiences.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. 74, you said?
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. That's an inspiration.
Yeah, she's awesome.
So in closing, what has been your favorite thing to train for?
Okay, so probably this last year I attempted the lead challenge. Okay. So Leadville, Colorado has this running race and a biking race in the early 80s. There was a mine in town, and the mine went bust. And the whole town was booming before this happened. But when the mine went down, everything in the town was around the mine. And so this guy, Ken Kubler, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, he came up with this idea of a race across the sky, a 100-mile race in Leadville, Colorado. We'll get a bunch of tourists in, bring a lot of energy into the town, and raise some money. And it's been this huge thing. Like, there's a 100-mile mountain bike race, a 100-mile trail run, where you're starting at like 10,000 feet. It goes up almost to 13,000, and then you're running 100 miles in the high altitude. And so 2 years ago, I attempted this race. I was just like 8 months into my running journey, and I was like, okay, let me put this big, audacious challenge on the board and see what shakes out. And I was so nervous. I remember clicking like yes to sending in my application. I was like, oh man, like I was nervous. And I actually wound up DNFing, which means did not finish that race, because one thing that makes it difficult is the time cutoffs. So you have to reach certain checkpoints by a certain time, otherwise they pull you from the race. Gotcha. And so there's this big crux in the middle of the race where it's called Hope Pass, where we have to go up and over this mountain and then come back over. And so you're going up like 3,000 feet of vertical, back down, and then coming back up the backside and back down. So it's like, something like 7,000 feet of vertical gain over 20 miles, like right in the middle of the race. Wow. And so I'm a bigger guy. I'm like 240 pounds almost right now. And at the time I was a little bit lighter, but I don't do so well uphill. So I can only go so fast. And so I was so nervous for the rest of the race, because the farthest I've ever ran was like 50 miles at that time. And so everyone was telling me, hey, don't go out too hot, save some. Yeah. And so I took it conservative, and then I didn't save enough time in order to come back up and down that pass. So at mile 62, I wasn't able to finish the race, but that lit a fire in me, and I wanted to continue to train for it. I liked being in the mountains, being in Colorado, and pushing myself vertically and in ways that I'm not good at. Like, there's some things that I'm best in the world at, and then there's some that I'm not. And so I was like, I was learning a lot. I liked pushing myself in that way. And so I doubled down on something called the Lead Challenge, where Leadville has a series of races now. So there's the two main ones, which are the 100-mile bike and 100-mile run. But they also have 50-mile races, 10Ks, and marathon. Okay. And so to do the Lead Challenge, you do all those races.
Oh, wow.
So last year, I signed up for that. And my buddies actually texted me about the crossing for cystic fibrosis. And they were like, hey, we're doing it on water bikes. One of our friends has this company where they have like these pontoons, and you're on a bike and you're biking across. Like, I know it's the weekend before you start this lead challenge. You want to do it? I was like, okay, let's try. So I go out to the Bahamas. We pedal across.
Oh wow, you did it!
And then come back, and like 5 days later is the trail marathon, which is what they say the highest and hardest marathon in the United States, because you go up to over 13,000 feet, which is hard to breathe at that altitude, and you're covering over 6,000 feet of vertical gain. So it's very different than like a flat road marathon. Like, so that was that weekend, and then the next weekend was the 50-mile run and bike. And so for the official lead challenge, you only have to do 2, but I was like, if I'm here, you do them both. It's called Silver King. I was like, let me try to do the Silver King. So you ran the first day on Saturday, and then the next day you bike the 50.
Wow.
And then you have like 3 weeks off or a month off, and you do the 100-mile mountain bike race on Saturday. On Sunday, they make you wake up and run a 10K. And then the next Saturday at 4 a.m., you do the big boy, the 100-mile trail run.
Wow. So the 100 miles at the very end.
Very end.
Wow. That's incredible.
So that's what I did. And that was the most fun to train for because
Okay.
a lot of my friends were doing those things also.
Yeah.
So we'd have like, fun time going. You're fortunate. We live like 2 hours from Leadville.
Yeah.
So you can go up there on the weekends, get on the course, try it out. It's just cool energy. Right? Even now thinking about it, I'm like, I'm not conditioned to that. And I'm just going to do the 100-mile bike this year.
Okay.
But I
just
think
be there and being a part of it.
it's super fun.
Yeah.
When you're at the start line of a 100-mile race, you're looking around and you see everyone that's there and they're nervous. They have, between, maybe 15 and 35 or 40 hours ahead of them. And so at least the people that I'm standing around, it's 30 hours around them, mostly, like 25, 30 hours around them. But you know how much went into this moment, how much time sacrifice from their family, how much they've put into their training, how much they had to believe in themselves. It's like super emotional. And then you set off on this odyssey, and they're the most supportive people I've ever met in my life. Especially if you do any type of out and back ultra marathon, you're passing everyone or everyone's passing you at some point. And I've never said so many like, nice job, looking good, keep it up, nice work. Constantly encouraging.
Yeah.
It's like,
I can
incredible.
imagine like staying at that starting line, like you're saying, you got all these people who've been working so hard for this. It's probably, this is like a huge life event.
Yeah, huge.
For many people, because not everyone's doing this is doing this all the time, right? For many people, this may be like that once in a lifetime challenge, and you're there participating with them and getting to be a part of those moments. That's such a huge thing. I love being around people when they're winning, and I say that not obviously I like being there to help support when they're doing hard things, even if they didn't accomplish, but just like to see them just get to the other side, like set that goal and be like, hell yeah, you beat it, you won. And there's just something about experiencing that with someone. Yeah.
I mean, it's with Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena poem.
Yes.
They're like, all the triumph goes to the man in the arena doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so when you sign up for that, you're putting yourself out on the line.
In the
and
arena.
most of the people that are there, they're not trying to win the race. So it's like, yes, it's a race, but it's a 100-mile race. It's a long time. Like, there's a lot that can go, a lot of problem solving, a lot that can happen within that, which is fun for the brain too.
Yeah.
So people are really encouraging.
Yeah.
And you meet a lot of cool friends. And I never thought I would be into running.
Yeah.
Never thought I would like it. Played college football. And now I'm like, I highly encourage everyone at some point in your life to try it.
Yeah.
And you can start real slow. And I'm happy to help you and talk about it. When I first started, I was running 15-minute miles.
Wow.
I was walking. I was running a little bit, walking, running a little bit, walking, building up my heart, my aerobic capacity. Even though at the time I could run like a 7-minute mile, I had to teach myself how to run slower so my heart rate could be lower, so I wasn't putting as much stress on my nervous system, basically on my aerobic system, because that would burn me out. Then I get sick, I get injured, whatever.
So the strategy behind it. Yeah.
It's a lot of zone 2, if you're curious, that's the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, I so appreciate you sharing and being here. Theoffense.com is your website.
.co.
Offense.co. And Mike Aidala, or Mike.Aidala. Spell your last name?
It's Aidala.
Okay, perfect. And man, I so appreciate you being here. And if you've listened to some of these stories and you're inspired, go out and do hard things and experience life, and can't promote that more, I'm not going to tell you should do it. Just going to say that it's worth considering. So
I just share one thing about you, and you can feel free to take this out. One thing that we're at your house right now, and so when I came over, you showed me you have this beautiful like living room area, and there's this net hanging on top of it, and it's like, what is this net? And you talk to me about your daughter, how she loves Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and like these different like kind of fantasy things, and you took action, created something for her where she could lay in this like really amazing net and read her books and be creative, and she's written a book and there's posters on the walls, and like you're supporting her in that way and encouraging her in that, and I think that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's big kudos to my wife. She's amazing and a great partner, and I appreciate it, man. So,
yeah, heck yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
So much.
Thank you.